Hi everyone, my name is David. I'm a life coach. Thank you for joining me for today's video about secondary psychopaths. I want to try to make this easy and digestible. Psychopathy can be a very difficult topic to comprehend or understand. I've studied psychopathy for a long time. I think I have a pretty good grasp on it. And I don't want to talk about any kind of, or refer secondary psychopath as the diagnosis, more of a concept to help you guys understand what it is. I think it's very interesting, and I'm sure a lot of you do too, especially who tuned into this video. Psychopaths fall under a personality disorder that's called antisocial personality disorder. There are 10 personality disorders, antisocial being one, and it's in a cluster. They kind of separate personality disorders into clusters, and I'm speaking of cluster B. Antisocial personality disorder has links to the other personality disorders in the cluster B, which is narcissistic, histrionic, and borderline. So under antisocial personality disorder, you have sociopaths and psychopaths, and main difference would be the psychopath is born this way. You can actually see in brain scans, you can detect this, where the sociopath was made this way. Very, very important to understand this. The psychopath born a psychopath typically might even need a trigger to have psychopathic behaviors. The psychopaths you see on TV, news, media, the ones who murdered people, grotesque murders, is a very, very small percentage of psychopaths. They're not like, most of them aren't like that. But I'm speaking of the secondary psychopath today. So I'm gonna try to explain this concept by using different references. So think of the people who, and we've all heard this, and we might have even said this in our jobs, and we've said, oh, I just work here. You know, you think of a bank that takes families' homes away from them because they couldn't make payments, putting them on the streets, stuff like this. And the person that works for the bank, you know, I'm not the one doing that. I just work here. It's kind of like that. And I'm definitely not calling these people psychopaths. I'm trying to help you understand this concept. And it's basically someone can work for a business that may not coincide with their own true beliefs and values, things like this. And they go to work, and like I said, maybe most of us have done things like this or had jobs like this where we didn't really support all the actions and behaviors that our company takes. And one thing that's very, very important to understand is that businesses, companies, things like this don't have a conscience. It's very, very important to know this and realize this. And we get so angry at businesses and companies, right, for making decisions that really hurt and affect other people without conscience. And it's not necessarily the people running the business are psychopaths and don't have a conscience. They tend to lose their conscience at work. And they kind of set that aside, and our brains actually do this. Our brains, we have different parts of our brains that manage and control different parts of our life. And to help you understand that, think of problems you have in your emotional life that become so great that they tend to leak into our work life. So we could have a bad fight with our loved one at night, and it goes unresolved, and we go to bed and we wake up in the morning and it's still there. And when we get to work, it's less. Any of you guys ever experienced that? Where it's less painful. It may not be on our minds the whole day at work. We feel better at work than at home. And I truly believe this is the root of people who are addicted to their work, people who immerse themselves in their work, allowing their emotional life to fail, to not maintain it. And it's really sad, actually. But it's when we go to work and this problem, our argument from the night before, seeps into our work life and affects us a lot. But the secondary psychopath would be just kind of like that, the person who who goes to their work, their business. They don't agree with what this company does, but they're able to separate their own personal, emotional life, their values. They kind of leave it all at home and go to work and say, I just work here, I'm sorry. Leaving their conscience out, leaving their conscience, or let's say their regrets and things like this to the company, right? So other places you'll see this, a person kind of change into a secondary psychopath, maybe prison. And it's very common for people in prison to go to prison, even innocent, right? Didn't commit the crime, or a crime of maybe a drug offense, right? Where they're not psychopaths, they're not bad people necessarily. They commit a crime that makes them go to prison for years, and in that prison they become a better criminal. They may learn to protect themselves by killing somebody, and they kind of leave this consciousness. Another example I would say would be war. They don't believe murder is right, and in war they leave their conscience up to the federal government, to the military, to their country, rationalizing that it's okay, to kill people to protect the people back at home. And I'm not judging that at all. I support every soldier. I'm just trying to explain a concept to you guys. You might see this in cults. Cults are typically very psychopathic, extremely narcissistic, aren't they? Cult leaders, extremely narcissistic and very much on that psychopathic scale. And they may start finding themselves doing things such as the leader of the cult does, the ultimate flying monkey, right? And mistreating other people in the cult for the leader and giving up their values and stuff like this, losing themselves and becoming, or practicing psychopathic behaviors. I think the best explanation are gangs. If you're talking about like street gangs that we have here in America, you will see, this is extremely common, you'll see maybe a family that lives in an area that is growing in street gangs, kind of inducting people into their gang. And you'll see children, teenagers that live in these areas that aren't psychopathic, that don't hurt people. They have values and stuff like this. But as they feel like they're being forced into a gang, they want to survive, and they're tested in the beginning. They have to commit heinous crimes maybe for a gang, and they do so by leaving the conscience up to the gang, right? I'm not like this, the gang is. And slowly, after they're in these gangs for so long and exposed, their environment is just toxic and violent and dangerous, and they slowly lose their conscience more and more and practice these types of violent behaviors. And I think that's a good description of what a secondary psychopath is, because you can have gangs where there's members in the gang that do have a conscience, that believe that a lot of the things that the gang does and even they start doing are wrong. But it's like, I just work here, right? I'm just trying to survive. And so secondary psychopaths can often have some empathy and regret, things like this, where a lot of psychopaths do not. So it's not necessarily a diagnosis I'm speaking of, it's behaviors. I hope that helps you guys understand. I hope that makes some sense. And keep asking questions down below. Anything you ask me, I'll answer for you. I think this is a really interesting topic and subject. I think this starts to, and I think it can relate to toxic relationships we find ourselves in, really. People who have toxic relationships with disordered people, narcissists and borderlines and sociopaths and histrionics, if they don't end these relationships, they'll find themselves trying to survive in them. And they'll often adapt their behaviors that they don't like and don't agree with, that hurt them. And they find themselves displaying the same behaviors and treating the other person bad instead of getting out of the relationship. and they have to kind of lose a sense of their conscious, right? How do we do that without rationalizing that it's not my fault that the other person started it, things like this, and we must break free from these and be our own person, forming our own opinion, right? Holding true to our values and not being pressured by outside environmental factors, okay? I think the message in this, really, to all of you, is to don't change who you are for other people. We can reinvent and recreate who we are every day, and if there's something we don't like about ourselves, we've made mistakes, we failed, things like this, we can always change who we are tomorrow, okay? Always. And we don't have to kind of adopt these behaviors and become people like this ourselves. Our parents, our teachers may not have taught us how to maintain and manage our relationships, and we find ourselves, what we think, we're stuck in them, feeling helpless and hopeless and not sure what to do. And we tend to lose a sense of ourselves, our values, our feelings, and our needs and wants. Losing our conscious. Conscious is awareness, right? Awareness. And people that excuse their behaviors and rationalize and justify their behaviors as if somebody else's fault. Somebody else made me do this. And it's extremely important if we find ourselves in these situations to find a way to get out of them, okay? Thank you. I hope you found this interesting. Like I said, add anything you want to. There's so much more to this topic that I didn't want to get into because I just wanted to keep it basic to help you guys understand the concept more than any diagnosis and using medical terms, stuff like this. So add your own examples of this, what you think it is, and ask questions, okay? All right? Thank you, guys. You can find me on daviddemars.com. Love yourself first. Bye.